So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Total Drama. So let's start the series. A young man with gel black hair and camp counselor-like equipment enters the camera as it switches on and shows a dock with a mountain in the background. Hey, we're coming at you live from Camp 1 somewhere in Madesa. Here's the deal, 23 campers signed up to spend 8 weeks at the old summer camp, where they will compete in challenges against each other and then face the judgment of their fellow campers every 3 days. One team will either win a reward or watch one of their team members walk down the dock of shame to the loser boat and leave Total Drama Island for good. I'm Chris Lawn, one of your hosts, and he's dropping season 1 of the hottest new reality shows on television right now. Here, their faith will be determined at a dramatic campfire ceremony where all but one camper will receive marshmallows on a stick each week. In the end, only one camper will remain standing and receive cheesy tabloid fame, magazines with his face on the cover, a small fortune, and a treasure chest. Let's face it, they'll probably blow it in a week to survive, where they'll have to fight fly eyes, grizzly bears, and disgusting camp food, and every moment will be captured on one of the hundreds of cameras positioned throughout the camp who will break under the strain. Find out here on Total Drama Island right now. At the conclusion of his statement, the theme music for Total Drama Island plays as a result of his line. Welcome back to Total Drama Island, okay? It's time to meet our first 12 campers. We informed them that they would all be staying at this 5-star resort, so if they seem a little irate, that's probably why the first contestant to arrive, a motorboat, can be heard. What's up, Chris? Chris greeted the perky girl, saying, wow, you look shorter in real life. Beth was a little on the pudgy side, with chestnut brown hair pulled back in a high ponytail. She wore an oversized green and gold shirt embellished with a variety of pin-on buttons, and her pale pink slacks highlighted her nerdiness with Coke bottle glasses and railroad track braces. Her family apparently couldn't afford modern orthodontia. The next person to arrive was DJ, who people would describe as a giant wearing a white cap, brown shirt with the letter D on it, black/gray shorts, and dark brown sandals. Without a second thought, anyone would assume that he was into sports or at least worked out. Body, thanks Chris dryly, Chris said, referring to the girl's barb, who instantly irritated him. Hey, you're sure you got the right place? He looked around and asked, here, where's the hot tub? He mentioned that he had read in that contract that there was a hot tub, so he thought, this is it, Camp Wanaka. Chris diverted the conversation and pointed out the direction of the campsite. Yeah, it did, the host said in an unhelpful manner, but the gentle giant shrugged his shoulders as he continued down the dock. The next camper was a young woman with short hair dyed pitch. Her outfit consisted of a short skirt with a patchwork look that did little to cover up her luscious legs, forest green hose, black knee-high platform boots, and a sleeved corset top that arranged her above-average cis chest to its best advantage. Her pasty complexion was not the artificial chai white of a hardcore goth, but rather the natural pour of fair skin that rarely feels the sun, unlike Beth and he smiled and said, hey Gwen, you mean we're staying here? She asked, I wonder if the trailer would be big enough to fit a handful of people, let alone all the contestants. No, you're staying here, he said, pointing to the old log cabins. My crib is an Airstream with AC. DJ didn't bring any luggage. The contestants had been given that option because some had brought more than they could carry in a single trip, and anything they didn't bring off the boat in their disembarking shots would be offloaded later. The girl scowled in response to the trailer, saying, I didn't sign up for this. She should have known that this was likely going to be a bad Survivor ripoff with a number of pointless challenges and people letting their emotions run high for other people's sick and depraved enjoyment. "Actually, you did," Chris said, laughing. Gwen stormed up to the applications that were in Chris's hands before snatching them and then, with impressive strength, tore them all in half. Laughed once more, anticipating that the good thing about lawyers is that they create a lot of copies. Chris smirked, which only served to make Gwen even more angry. "I'm not staying here," she said, arguing that she wasn't going to be forced to endure months of suffering and insanity for the amusement of others. "Cool," she muttered darkly under her breath, "because your ride just left the boat horn honks as the captain signals that he was heading back to the mainland, ___." Despite what the final footage of the episode would imply, there weren't 24 separate boats, just the same 2 boats coming and going, and the contestants were kept apart to give the audience a sense of how much money was truly being thrown into the series. Careful editing and other techniques were used to give the best footage, and therefore the 4th contestant. In with another contestant, they have enough money to piss away on all these boats, but they couldn't give us better lodgings, unknown to Gwen. He arrived as a fax cowboy who had likely never spent a day around livestock in his life. He was dressed in sandals, jeans, a pink silk button-down shirt, and a 10-gon hat. His shirt was unbuttoned to flaunt his washboard abs. He wasn't a pretty boy, but a guy with his appearance would have no trouble luring the girls. "Chris Lawn, what's up, man? Welcome to the island, Jeffster. It's great to have you here, man. I'm really excited for this." Contestants Jeff and Chris appear to be trying to outdo each other. "Hey, thanks, man," Gwen said sarcastically at the display. "If they say man one more time, I'm going to puke the boat once more," which drove everyone crazy. This is Lindsay, the host, who was introduced as a blonde bombshell emerged from the newest boat wearing a warm-colored ensemble that included a short skirt, a halter top that seemed to strain the objects behind it, and a baby blue bandana for her hair. The rest of her hair was. The next contestant arrived, and the boat docked again in a tall, model, drop-dead gorgeous girl with regal bearing her straight waist-length hair that was unbound and as black and glossy as jet. Her skin was straightened out, and her face was made up subtly and skillfully without being too shabby. Chris said, "Hello, I'm Chris Lawn, the host of the show. What was your name?" The attractive girl said, "I'm Chris Lawn." Chris stressed, "I'm sorry, I'm not good with names." The new arrival removed her sunglasses and took in her surroundings. She looked to be of mixed blood with Asian features, but her skin was pale, and she had a snood-like aura about her. She skipped introductions altogether, saying with a smile that the contestants would be welcome to the island. The girl was wearing a stylish maroon top that was little more than a sports bra, barely legal shorts, and open-toed spike-heeled shoes. As she stalked past, Heather snapped, "I'm not staying in this trash heap," realizing that the island itself did not live up to the images that were shown. "I'm calling my parents," calling them with what the host asked with false pleasantness. "Seems you've already forgotten you were asked to surrender your phone, iPad, and any other advice that can connect to the outside world." Heather found herself stiffening, but she did not turn to face McLean. Cursed the fact that he was right. Even if she had her phone, the likelihood of her receiving a signal was extremely slim. Since she was stuck in this dump, she might as well stick to her plan to use the show to become famous. Reluctantly, she went and joined the others, saying, "Hello, it looks like we're your new friends." She accidentally spits while spitting, and for the next 8 weeks, she snapped at Beth, making her feel depressed. Duncan, The boat then dropped off a punk type with a wiry build. "I don't like surprises," he said to Chris, menacingly hammering his fist into his open palm. "Yeah, your parole officer warned me about that man. He also told me to give him a holler anytime and have you return back to juvie." Duncan sniffs okay. He was wearing a black t-shirt with a large skull design on it over a long-sleeved yellow undershirt. His dark hair was styled in a green faux hawk, and his face was heavily pierced. Another contestant had arrived, ladies and gentlemen. Tyler, a tall, lanky guy in all-red jogging suit and short brown hair, was skiing towards them. He was doing well until he waved to everyone and lost his footing, starting to flip through the water until he crashed into the luggage at the docks, making a stray bag fall in the water. He then slid up to Heather, where the other contestants were standing, and said, "Meet you by the campfire, gorgeous." Heather scoffed in disgust. Another camper who arrived was wearing glasses with thick lenses for his face, and he had some straight chin hairs that were supposed to be a goatee, but something went wrong with his hair. His hair was very dark auburn, and he was scrawny and unfit. He was wearing a blue shirt with a hamburger for the logo, green pants, and white high tops. Chris laughed, and the child sighed, "Welcome to Camp Harold." "What's he looking at?" Beth asked. The next boy off the boat was a guitar player, and he was dressed casually. His most impressive item was a semi-camo shirt with short camo patterned sleeves and a solid light greenish torso featuring a black handprint on his chest, the significance of which he never bothered to explain. He wore a large backpack in lieu of luggage and carried what could only be an acoustic guitar. "Crappy summer camp and not on some big stage or something, you got it," and he skips like a fairy. His demeanor was relaxed and unaffected, and his black hair, which was longer in the bangs than elsewhere, went strangely with his green eyes. This is not to say that the effect was unpleasant in any way, like Jeff, who wore a cleft chin. "Nice to meet you, Trent. I saw you on that figure skating show. Nice job." "Thank you, Trent. I knew I would rock that show. I saw that one of the guys dropped his partner on her head, so they got immunity that week." Beth brought up Lucky. "I hope I get dropped on my head," Harold said. Lindsay said, "This is it, Harold picks his nose a lot, much to the nauseation of the others." Okay, so another boat arrived, and this time, the tall, willowy woman was pretty in the way of the girl next door. She wore her long, naturally blonde hair in a low ponytail that was more practical than stylish, and she didn't wear makeup. She was dressed simply in a sky blue hoodie, shorts, and sandals, and she was carrying a red and gold surfboard. "Hey, Bridget, our surfer chick, good board." When one of the other campers called out, "This ain't Malibu, honey," she asked, "I thought we were going to be on a beach." After surveying the area, her face fell slightly in disappointment. Chris then pointed out that the island did, in fact, have a beach of sorts, 2 or 3 meters of sand between lake and greensward, I mean a surfing beach. Bridget clarified, "Sorry, can't help you there." Chris responded with a bland smile, implying that his incapacity to assist didn't really bother him. "Would be surfing during the competition, I guess I can settle for swimming," the surfer girl said, sighing at this disappointment. Bridget hits Chris' lawn with her surfboard when she suddenly turns, and it hurts the girl watching it. Another boat comes, and down from it comes Ste, a spiky blonde teen dressed for survival hunting. His outfit was all black with green stripes for camouflage, and his skin was a light tan shade shorter than DJ's, but he was fairly well built, suggesting that he was athletic and had cerulean blue eyes. Yes, Naruto the shinobi was happy that you could attend. Chris greeted the blonde, mentioning the blonde's recent fame. "Thank you." He said hello to the host for a moment before approaching the group of contestants. "Hello, Bridget," he said, swinging her board and accidentally hitting Trent, which made some of the campers duck. Harold, the boardman, then shouted, "Hello, I'm Beth." Bridget apologized in a haze of excitement. In any case, Bridget jokingly remarked, "I can't believe we got a celebrity in our midst." Naruto rubbed the back of his neck and shrugged, "I try not to let it go to my head." "So tell us, when can we expect a Shinobi 2? Beth asked, and Naru again shrugged, "I don't know what to tell you, there's not even a script, just some ideas. They're going to stop at a sequel." Gwen said, "I don't know what to tell you, there's not even a script, just some ideas. They're going to stop at a sequel." Had to have a genre where she didn't put up with the same cliched characters and plots being reused. "Alright, we've all met the movie star, so why don't you unfollow him later?" "I'm trying to focus on what's happening," when the agitated Asian Canadian said, "I'm tired of their chatter. Someone missed their double cappuccino macchiato this morning." Duncan made a joke about Heather's background, to which she responded angrily. Then boats arrived, and Chris let out a sounding sigh, and the next camper is a white long-sleeved undershirt, a short-sleeved miss-buttoned blue button-down shirt, and a red lightweight sweater vest made up his layered top. "Have you got my memo about my life-threatening allergies?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. "I'm sure someone did," Chris replied, with the same unhelpful response. Noah had longish dark brown hair, no distinguishable style, and a generic brown skin tone that suggested native or Hispanic extraction. Did to the other campers, to be honest, he didn't really care good. The question, along with the expression of uncertainty and unease, said it all: "It's your mother's house and we're throwing a party." Duncan snidely responded for the host, "Did you do them yourself?" as he grabbed Noah's lip and said, "Did you want one?" He sighed, "No thanks, can I have my lip back please?" He managed to mumble something coherent, "Thanks," and then released Noah's lip. The boat returned, and the most recent arrival is one of the troop's stouter but not fat girls. She wore her shoulder-length hair in a fine weave with the strands pulled back in a ponytail. She was dressed simply in jeans and a t-shirt that might have been purchased from a mall kiosk. Her outfit included a light brown shirt that hugged her ample hips and large, spacious backside with dark skin and hoop earrings. "What's up, everyone? Lezen is in the house. Hey, how are you? How's it going? Feel free to quit now and save." The movie star asked Naruto, "What's up?" with a wink and a hand sign, implying that she might be open to the possibility of getting to know the blonde better, coming to Cody and Harold. The cheerful H-girl showed that she could walk and chew gum at the same time by fist-bumping Cody with one hand and patting Harold's back with the other. "You guys are out of trouble because I came to win," she said, not waiting for a response. Harold finished gasping at Lena and said, "Excuse me, you're really big and loud." He was obviously unaware that this was not the type of thing you say to a woman, so he foolishly said in his fascination, "Oh no, you didn't, you haven't seen anything yet." "I'll show you, big baby, you keep that up, you'll save the producers time editing you into a stereotype, but that might be asking a bit too much for you." The bookworm snarked, "What did you just say to me there?" "I got your stereotype right here, ignore him," homegirl demanded as she rolled up her sleeves to show off biceps that far outclassed most of the other limbs. Naruto had moved between the sister and the nerd, "So you don't want to blow your chances before the competition even starts, okay? Well, people, calm down." Chris called down the dock after noticing the altercation but not the words that caused it. There will be plenty of time for infighting later. Whatever Lana said to no one in particular, she stopped trying to approach Noah, which was Naruto's cue to let her go, even though he watched her for a few seconds until it appeared that everything would calm down. The boat docked again, but instead of one contestant, two arrived. One was as slender as a rail, with black hair and bronze skin, though it was unclear at first whether this was due to her ancestry or lifestyle. The other newcomer was shorter, very fat, and very fair, with black dyed hair that was styled in the same high pigtails as her companion. These twins were obviously wearing matching outfits, including pink shorts that were almost as skimpy as Heather's, black and white prison-striped shirts, and matching luggage. Oh my God, it's summer camp. Yay! Finally, after 10 minutes of pointless twin chatter, the next contestant, Ezekiel, arrived. Chris greeted the newcomer, and the next boy to arrive had a rustic, unfashionable air about him. His simple yet functional outfit consisted of "Our homeschooled country boy, ladies and gentlemen," Chris said to the camera when he threw in a jab about freaky prairie people that he probably only did so because he knew it would probably be edited out. "Just don't say much and try not to get kicked off too early, okay, sir?" He was wearing jeans, work boots, a heavy greenish hoodie version, and a toque. He had his hair in a mullet and a downy proto-beard on his chin. "I think I see a bird." Take in everything she had just witnessed. "That's amazing, and we're only halfway through." Naruto said, "Well, it was better than just sitting around and continuing to observe other worlds for the 100th times." Even after all this time, he didn't know how Hagar Romo did it. He just didn't have the elder sage's patience and needed to and wanted to interact with people on the boat's next stop. A short, somewhat skinny boy with short brown hair and long bangs almost. His most distinctive physical characteristic, however, was that he was spitting gap in his teeth. This was Cody the Troop, a science geek who exuded coolness, or at least what he thought coolness was, but it didn't quite match his attire, which consisted of an off-white button-down shirt with a short-sleeved sweater with a few stripes across the chest and cargo pants. "Cody the Coder, the Code Me, dude, I'm excited to be here, man. I see the women have already arrived, all right." Everyone rolled their eyes when he winked at them. Cody wanted to say something to Lashana, but the sassy girl put her finger on his lips, so he just smirked before moving on to the next contestant. Eva arrived, and it was nice to see her. She had a classic hourglass figure, legs that were reasonably shapely despite being as hard as iron, and an athletic appearance that contrasted with the more feminine female contestants who had come so far. Eva had a beauty mark on her lip, but she didn't seem particularly interested in how she looked. She was happy to keep the unibrow that nature had given her, even though even normal eyebrows might have looked like one with her perpetual scowl. She wore no makeup other than lipstick that matched her hazel eyes, and Eva grunted when he greeted him. Her sullen expression was as constant as Land's smile and trudged. She thought that would be a good place to wait for the other contestants to arrive down the dock when she reached Cody and Harold. As she turned to face the end of the dock, she dropped her bag, which fell to the dock with a heavy clunk. Cody asked, trying to start a conversation, "What's in there?" "Dumbbells?" "Yes, she's all yours," Duncan replied. The next arrival was the largest by far in size, dwarfing the others, with only DJ matching him in height, but the boy was extremely fat, weighing at least 400 pounds. He had a scraggly little mop of unkempt blonde hair, shorts, sneakers, and what appeared to be a fake team shirt of some sort. "Wahoo Chris," the fat kid said, laughing, "this is awesome." As he barreled down the dock, he tripped and hit his head against the dock. "Owen. Welcome, awesome to be here, man," he said, and continued talking until Gwen tried to guess what the fat kid would say next. "Wow, awesome, are you going to be on my team?" Gwen. She was not impressed by what she was seeing so far, so she responded cynically to the question, "Wow, you're about finished, dude." "I'm just so psyched cool." And here comes Courtney. Although not a model, Courtney was still a head-turner because of her tanned complexion, which showed that she spent a lot of time outside, and her shoulder-length chestnut brown hair, which she wore loosely. Her outfit consisted of a short, light gray sweater over a larger off-white blouse, and calf-length olive green. "Thank you." Courtney joined the other contestants and engaged in polite introductions with several of them. "Hello, you must be the other contestants. It's really nice to meet you all. How's it going?" he said, shaking her hand. "Nice to meet you," she replied, responding to a strong and pudgy grip. She also wore pants that hugged her hips quite nicely, but even with these shoes, it was quickly apparent that she was rather short compared to the others. "I'm not sure what you mean when you say that." Naruto gave her a light-hearted smile, "but thank you." I suppose Courtney's friendly banter and glad-handing stopped abruptly when the final competitor showed up, as did all other conversations. Now, for lack of a better description, Justin was a god among men. He had a ripped physique that was outside the realm of bodybuilders' exaggeration, though it did ripple under his tight t-shirt. He also wore old, unremarkable clothes. The boys' reactions to the new arrival were mixed. Some were contemptuous of the pretty boy, while others admired his ripped physique, knowing that a guy didn't get that way without a lot of work. He had blue jeans and sneakers, but none of the girls noticed those until later. His shortish hair was straight, glossy, and raven black. His skin was flawless bronze, his teeth were flawless white, and his eyes, oh, those eyes beckoning sapphire wells, that a girl could drown in if she wasn't careful. Of work, regardless of his natural talents, and some people saw a dangerous competitor who could harm their own chances of hooking up with someone. "Welcome to Total Drama Island, Chris. This is fantastic." The teenager responded enthusiastically, as he was already planning how he was going to win. "I can handle that." He smiled and said, "I like your pants, thanks man, because they look like they're all worn out." He laughed, "Did you buy them like that?" "No, just had them." A slender girl with long, somewhat curly hair that was a fiery Scotch orange, red and green eyes emerged from the last boat as the teen walked down the dock. She was wearing a green halter top with a collar and a cleavage window, and she was the only girl wearing a long skirt that reached almost to her knees. The skirt had an odd design that covered most of her thighs on the outside but hardly on the inside. When the boat came to a stop, Izzy, the new arrival, hurried to the gangplank but stubbed her toe and took a header off the boat. She recovered quickly, performed a flip, and landed cat-like on her feet just about as close to the end of the dock as she could have done without falling into the water. Overall, it appeared as though Izzy had simply wrapped a yellow-green towel around her hips. All in all, it was knotted on one side and hung low on her hips, only partially covering her green bikini-like panties. The fat kid said, "First things first, we need a group photo for the promos." Everyone on the end of the dock. The rest of the campers then walked down to the end of the dock of shame, where the cameraman took his sweet time getting ready. When he was ready, he called for everyone to smile, and most of the teenagers managed to do so despite their reservations. "Okay, 1 2 3 go, oops, forget the lens cap, okay, hold that pose. Summer camp is so cool. Do you have papier-mâché here? Are we having lunch soon? In 10 minutes, the group of 23 campers was led to the campfire pit as Chris continued to explain the rules and setup of the game show. This is Camp Wanaka, your home for the remainder of your stay here, and the campers sitting around you will be your neighbors. 120 no wait cards full, hang on, man, my face is starting to freeze. Lena complained. Got it, everyone said Wanaka, and the campers replied, Wanakawa. The old rigidity bridge collapsed, and several of the campers fell in. Cabin mates, your rivals, and possibly even your friends, you dig. Duncan called out, what will the sleeping arrangements be, because I would like to request a bunk under her. He pointed to Heather, whose mouth dropped open. They're not co-ed, are they? She asked, the horror still visible on her face. It appeared as though she was attempting to resist the urge to shiver in disgust. No, girls get one side of each. As much as Chris wanted to make them co-ed for all the drama that could arise, their lawyers advised against it in order to reduce the likelihood that the business and show would be sued. Excuse me, Kyle, but could I please have a cabin with a view of the lake? Lindsay asked, batting her eyelashes and attempting to use her beauty for better accommodations. Okay, you are, but that's not really how it works here, and Chris, the host, corrected Katie and Sty, respectively. At the conclusion of their little tirades, Gwen darkly complained as she massaged her forehead to relieve the slowly developing migraine. This cannot be happening, Chris said unsympathetically, adding that, they would just die if they were split up. Come on guys, it'll be fun, it's like a big sleepover, Owen exclaimed, grabbing Gwen and Tyler and giving them a bear hug. As I explained last time, there were changes in the contracts, and since most of you felt it was appropriate not to go over the revisions, I'll go over a few things quickly, and anything you're not aware of is your own fault. Thanks to the addition of a generous partner, some of the stunts have been greatly altered, and we've also been able to add new staff members, which you will eventually get around to meeting. With the uneven number of applicants, any team formation would be unbalanced, so the only way to fix that is with a challenge that will help shave off that extra number by tomorrow. In any case, you have 30 minutes to. Before we resumed the tour, campers were shown to their cabins, which appeared rather small and plain. The cabin had 12 bunk beds, so questions about the bunking arrangements had mostly focused on who would have upper bunks and who would have lower bunks. However, the decision to combine 2 beds for Owen came down to 2 main factors. Owen was too big to fit in a single bed, and no one wanted to bunk under him for fear of it collapsing. Plans quickly turned to discussing the other sex, but she's so stupid that I'm surprised she can still breathe. She would be great for a brief affair, but as for a girlfriend, not so much. Naruto shook his head at the erratic nature of the conversation. It's true that Lindsay wasn't the smartest, but she seemed nice, and there might be more to her. We don't know, some people tend to have hidden depths, so we shouldn't be so quick to judge them. I guess Bridget is nice, and from what he saw, she seems to have a down-to-earth disposition. I guess that Courtney girl also seems okay. He shrugged, I don't know, the only thing we can really go off of right now is their looks. The conversation didn't last long because there wasn't much to go on other than looks. Attention campers, Chris. Anyway, Naruto, then, who do you think would make a great companion? Over the loudspeakers, it was announced, meet me in front of your cabins and we'll continue the orientation. About 10 minutes later, Chris took his young charges to the communal restroom, which some of you had already discovered. The host started off by saying, it has a few Bronze Age flush toilets, sinks, and no frills shower stalls, but it does have hot water sort of. Lindsay raised her hand, and Chris, anticipating the stupid beauty's question, replied, "A communal part means that since everyone will be using the same facilities, anyone who has an issue with that will simply have to deal with it. You will also need to figure out any scheduling issues you may have." Of course, everything was meant to be as dramatic as possible. You may have also found that the cabins lack electrical outlets, but the restroom does for those of you who use powered beauty aids. Additionally, if any of you have simple MP3 players or other non-communication devices that the producers didn't feel it was appropriate to seize, Chris escorted the campers to an ooze that appeared to be in general advanced decay. The host explained that this ooze is crucial, not just because it serves as a backup restroom in case you need to use it during an emergency. It is also where you will record your CONF professionals, without which no elimination game would be complete. You can enter there to record your innermost thoughts or simply to vent your feelings. The next stop was a large tent that held 2 cots and various medical supplies and equipment. Chris explained that this is the infirmary, where you can go to get fixed if one of the everyday hazards of camp life gets you. Are a great way to get screen time, so don't be shy and press that red button to remotely turn the camera on and off. That's the only control you can access because the camera settings have been pre-optimized and we don't want you to fiddle with them. Before the game is over, we can treat injuries like burns, sprains, and dislocations, which most of you will likely have. We can also remove porcupine quills, set broken bones, remove lance boils, resuscitate drowning victims, and treat life-threatening allergic reactions, food poisoning, arrow wounds, and bear mauling. The list went on to the point where some of the injuries listed seem to be rooted in the fantasy world. They're so commonplace that they hardly seem worth mentioning, but legal said we had to inform you that although we have a few half-liters of blood on hand, we do not have enough for a transfusion, so chances are we won't be able to assist you if you've been mauled by a wild animal. Chris then led the campers to a plain building that was bigger than the restroom but smaller than the infirmary's facilities. His typical blonde smile turned into a brilliant F-smile, the kind of smile that television news anchors use when covering major disasters. He told them that the cabins are the on-island shop, which is essentially a convenience store where you can get a variety of items to make your life a little easier. However, if you're worried about how you're going to have enough money to pay for these items during the game, we'll have a board up with a list of optional challenges. These items available in the shop range from minor aids to living convenience, but because Chris changed the rules so frequently, it wasn't like those items. Chris led the campers away from the actual campsite and a short distance up the shore to a small building with a secondary dock. He explained that this is the boat house, where we store canoes, life jackets, and other equipment when not in use. It also serves as a general maintenance shed, so you probably won't be here for long, but a few challenges might lead you here. Naruto looked inside and noticed a number of items, including chains, large hooks, harpoons, and other tools used for. The scent of blood was the only thing Chris noticed when he led his budding celebrities to what would be their last destination, the main lodge, the largest building in the camp and the most welcoming structure the campers had seen since coming to the island. It also seemed to be better maintained than the other buildings in the camp. At that point, when they were introduced to the chef, the cutout shutters slid aside and several pairs of eyes widened at the sight of the camp chef, a tall, burly black man who was even more muscular than DJ. He had a shaved head, though it was hard to tell because of his traditional chef's hat. He also had a deeply clenched chin and an all-pro gap in his teeth. He surveyed the campers with a frown because he had a sour disposition similar to Eva's, and many of them were shocked by his appearance. Chris then addressed the entire troop, saying, "This is Chef Hatchet. So-called because, well, I don't want to ruin the surprise, but he's also my aide, so you'll see him doing support work at most of the challenges. Here's how it works, Hatchet said loudly and angrily, I make it 3 times a day and you'll eat it 3 times a day, and I don't want to hear about special dietary needs. This isn't no 5-star restaurant, so you eat what I give you or you don't eat. Tonight's main course is Sloppy Joe's, so grab a tray, get your food, sit down, and don't give me no lip. The campers dutifully lined up, grabbed their buns and other necessities, and filed past Hatchet as he served the Sloppy Joe filling and the sides olive drab beans and something that probably used to be potato salad. A few campers who were considered skinny, like Cody or Heather, were served mystery meat instead of ground beef. All in all, the meals Chris added will be decided tomorrow after the challenge. I think I'm going to be sick, Bridget. I'm a vegetarian, but I can't eat anything that once had a face, Bridget admitted with a purse of her lips. Cool, mine just moved. This looks like dog food, Tyler said, prodding at the slop. There's no point in complaining, we signed up for this, and unless you want to blow up all the money you brought with you on the market, you might as well stomach through it, said Naruto, fighting past the offensive stench. Izzy screamed as she started prodding at the thing with exaggerated combat. As the campers sat looking at their dinners, Jeff decided to tempt the gods by turning toward Chris, who had returned to the lodge after a brief absence. The urban cowboy called, Yo, my man, can we order some pizza? Hatchet didn't show that he had heard Jeff, but as the hulking chef turned away from the common area, he suddenly swept his arm in the general direction of the camper. There was a metallic glint in the air, and Jeff felt a breeze that he wasn't used to feeling. The legendary teenagers looked with dismay toward the doorway next to it, but trembled a little as the butcher knife's point was embedded in the wall and impaled Jeff's hat on it. Only now did Hatchet look in Jeff's direction, fixing the urban cowboy with a "don't mess with me" glare. Hatchet had practiced that no-look knife throw a lot because he was a veteran of an organization that is currently undisclosed and knew exactly how to get someone's attention. As the campers got to know their teammates better and made predictions about what lay ahead, their appetite finally overcame any reservations about the food's uncertain origins. Bridget asked Jeff, who was seated across from her. I know, the urban cowboy replied easily, but it's the first challenge, so it can't be that hard. Right way to tempt fate. Naruto replied, I met this Chris guy and one of the producers before during one of my film shoots, and trust. Reality show producers don't like their contestants to be well rested because sleep-deprived people have less emotional control, and a harsh wake-up call makes people feel less rested, among other reasons. I'm not a fan of reality shows, but based on what I've heard, they'll do everything in their power to make sure we're at each other's throats by the time the teens started to return to their cabins at nightfall. Being equal, a blazing horn and Chris's voice were enough to startle the campers awake. Shortly after, the campers, some of whom were still wide-eyed and trembling from their wake-up call, filed into the lodge for breakfast. Chris was at the door greeting his young charges. His meticulously practiced bland smile covered his glee as he looked at his handiwork and saw that the breakfast was good, consisting of eggs runny side up, delicately carbonized bacon, and heavy, toasted golden black bread. The beverage options included lake water that Chris called for attention and said that they were to gather in front of the lodge in an hour to start the first challenge. Chris paused for a few moments for dramatic effect before dropping the other shoe. You are about to discover why you had to sign all those waivers to be on the show. Your first challenge can be dangerous potentially. I think I made it right. The teens' food still tasted of the horribly bitter grapefruit juice and milk that was clearly over the hill. A voice from off-camera called out Mr. Shington Naruto, who loudly expressed his surprise at getting the other camper. Attention, our trust, our campers are ready, Christopher. He looked every bit as professional as he sounded, with his hair cut to a short fade style, his skin a deep caramel complexion, and his eyes a light shade of hazel. He was in his 30s, had a small scar on his left cheek, wore a black Armani suit, black dress shoes around his neck, and a chain. Hello, young camper. I'm Marcus Shington, the executive producer of what I hope will be a long-running reality/survival TV show series. I appreciate everyone's willingness to volunteer for our show. I understand what you're thinking, though. An executive producer spends their days sitting behind desks chatting with investors and throwing parties. I must say, sir, you're wearing the suit pretty well. Let's just say that I prefer a more hands-on approach. As you have all noticed, there are an uneven number of campers, but that will be fixed soon. You will all be participating in the challenge of stealing one of these. He took a golden bell out of my pocket, and you will have a total of 20 bells over the course of 24 hours, beginning tomorrow at noon. Gwen interrupted to avoid disturbing anything, but if there are 20 bells, doesn't that mean 3 people will be eliminated? Good question, but no, this is where things get interesting. When the challenge begins, I won't be wearing any weights at all. Instead, I'll add weight each hour to give our less athletic contestants a chance until all the bells are obtained within an hour. I'll also start hiding bells one by one. If you get a bell, you're safe from elimination, but you can take more than one bell. If more than one person loses the bell, we will use a system that measures how close the player was and how long it took them to return to the beginning of the game. For players who receive more than one bell, each extra bell will take an hour away from their time. The player who receives their bell first and returns with the quickest time or the most bells wins. That's just part 1. There will be 2 more bells, silver bells, which can only be obtained by 2 campers. The winner of the silver bell will lead the opposing team, choose their members, and choose their team name. However, I'll go into more detail about part 2 of the test after part 1 is finished. The challenge will start in an hour, so if I were you all, I would take some time to stretch and get ready. Marcus Shington was a man who loved a challenge, so this was bound to be an enjoyable one. Naruto patiently waited for Marcus to arrive to start, reading the time 10:03 off his watch. When he first looked around, he saw that the campers were busy with their own activities. Gwen, a black girl with teal hair, was sitting by a tree with her eyes closed, and Cody, a geeky kid, was trying to talk to her. The key word here is trying, because he was stumbling over his words and the goth was ignoring him. Next, he saw that Beth, another geeky kid, was getting along with Lindsay, a gorgeous but somewhat dim blonde bombshell. Finally, he looked at Courtney, the typical A type. Types were characterized by clear characteristics like intelligence, attractiveness, and physical fitness, and they frequently succeeded in whatever they attempted. For example, Bridget, the surfer girl, Jeff Justin, a muscular Jamaican DJ, and Lena had formed their own small group. Next came the delinquent and the queen bee, the latter of whom flashed out at the former due to his innuendo and suggestive remarks about her. Naruto was studying the competition and had already selected the competitors who wouldn't be going that far. The butch Russian chick Eva wasn't going to go that far either, as she had already broken out in 2 fits of rage and her biceps were bulging. The most obvious conclusion would be that she was taking steroids because it wasn't natural for a woman to exercise to the point where her bodies literally lacked that much muscle mass. Katie and Sight, the dressed-alike girls, weren't going very far in the game. They were talking for almost 50 words per minute and didn't seem to have the same intelligence or physical characteristics that the others had. Gwen, who was one of the most balanced cast members based on his observations thus far, and Izzy were the ones he was keeping an eye out for. There was something off about Izzy, too, which was something Naruto had been enjoying since he arrived. Ordinary people were easy to read, but those with as much energy as Izzy were always a surprise waiting to happen. When he checked his watch again, he saw that it was 909 with that Asian Canadian let out a rather unladylike moan of frustration. Where the hell is this guy? He's late. The challenge was supposed to start at 9, and he's 10 minutes late. She was one of the more hostile campers, and he's also impatient, so if there's cheesecake involved, he probably won't show up for another 10 to 15 minutes. Naruto idly responded to the tense Agent San's exclamation, pulled out a pocket knife, and started whittling a small broken twig he found on the ground. "I'd get comfortable if I were you," he added, as his blade lopped off a large piece of. Gwen opened her eyes and started talking after the stick caused him to look down at the piece with a sad expression. "Young Nero," she said, as the blonde examined the twig. Gwen was trying her hardest not to act like a crazy stereotypical fan, but it was really hard to have the main star of one of her favorite movies right there. "Yes," he answered, his focus now off the blade. "No reason to be nervous. I don't bite unless it's requested." Gwen gave a forced laugh at the joke before finally remembering enough of. Normally, Gwen wouldn't have started a conversation so casually, but Naruto was an oddity to her. He didn't seem to fit into any of the high school cliques like most of the campers. He wasn't some jerk party boy or jock who started hitting on every girl in sight or meathead talking endlessly about sports. He was also surprisingly pleasant, if not quiet, in contrast to many celebrities these days who seem to make out with everyone. "Mr. Shington was always somewhat of a private backer in some of my projects and always detested being involved with committees because so many board members or company heads seem out of touch with what the viewers actually want to see instead of trying to enforce their own vision in the form of overplay cliches and stereotypes. Since it is their personal mission to act like they lost their damn minds constantly with doing something crazy to get in the news every other week, he just seemed comfortable. He supports projects that most people wouldn't, which is why my character in Shinobi, even though he teased some of the female characters, didn't have a love interest. Instead, he fell in love right away because there wasn't enough time to build a fully believable romantic relationship. This is in contrast to literally every other work of media that forces a romantic pairing for the sake of having one, regardless of how poorly it's done. If you're going to do something, you might as well put effort into it. Wow, that sounds like a bit of a. Bridget, a perfectionist, sat next to him. She had only seen the film because one of her friends had forced her to, primarily because she thought the lead actor was really attractive. Although Bridget didn't like the gore, she had to admit that the action choreography was fantastic, and unlike most anti-hero types, Naruto's character was likable rather than a jerkass who was trying way too hard to be cool. 912 flashed on his watch. "So since you're like a movie star, have you traveled the world?" Lindsay had always wanted to be a movie star, so naturally, she wanted to talk to the blonde. There are a lot of countryside people in Singapore and Latin, but mostly in the east of Japan. It's funny every time I go there because I'm always called a guy, which is a term for a foreigner, even though I'm actually of Asian descent. He added with a half-joking smile, and Heather snorted at this and spoke casually in Japanese. The last I heard, I'll admit, people of Asian descent didn't have blonde hair or blue eyes. It's strange, but so is being Asian Canadian. He surprised her by saying, "You speak Japanese, so what? That doesn't prove you're of Asian descent." She responded sharply, "Well, it's a good thing your word isn't the word of God now, is it?" He snapped back as the queen bee yelled at him. He shrugged it off without worrying about what the hell she could do to him anyway. He checked the time again, 9:15, and as soon as the jingle of bells filled the air, the campers started searching everywhere for the source of the executive producer had changed Marcus's attire to a t-shirt, cargo pants, and boots for better maneuverability. Ah, the lack of patience is a poor quality. You all remember the rules: 20 golden bells are followed by 2 silver bells, which will be for the team leader each hour. Naruto asked, "How long are you going to be hiding in the tree?" As he focused his eyes on the tree that the noise came from above. Marcus then fell to the ground in a crouching position. Yes, Mr. McGillis, he chose Owen out of the group by 24 hours. Do you mean straight through? Because after a couple I get hungry, and Marcus interrupted Owen in the middle of the question, already seeing this is where this was going, so you better decide how much time you're going to spend eating or sleeping each second. Those who don't get a bell will be positioned based on how close and how long it took that person to return to this spot. He led the crowd to Eva, who had another question. Yes, Miss Guerin, we're allowed to steal bells from the other campers, right? She asked, her menacing expression unnerving several of the weaker and cowardly campers. Yeah, why not? Marcus shrugged. This was definitely going to be quite entertaining. What if we eliminated the competition by another means? The butch girl asked, punching one fist into another. It is absolutely forbidden to use physical violence against another camper that could cause permanent or fatal injuries for this challenge at the very least, but if you believe you can beat me, you are welcome to try, but I can assure you that the results will not be satisfactory. Poor naive bastards. Naruto could see the overconfident expressions on the faces of campers like Duncan, Eva, and that Courtney girl. According to his own words, he was not a man who sat on his own ass. Naruto had first-hand knowledge of that when the man demonstrated that he had taken martial arts in. Since this was the bell test, Naruto thought he might as well help some of the campers while attempting to get one for himself. He might even figure out who he could set up to be eliminated. Naruto shook his head and decided against it, feeling that it wouldn't be possible to do so. The challenge then began, with several campers immediately lunging at the dark-skinned man only to be front-flipped over them with. Izzy, the orange-haired girl, gave a battle cry as she performed a series of flips, landing directly in front of Marcus. The Eva girl recovered first and threw a vicious left hook, and Marcus twisted his face to the side, narrowly avoiding the punch, but it was clear that his slowness of movement was exaggerated. He dropped down and sweep-kicked her, flicking his hand back, and knocked Duncan in the face, sending the delinquent crashing into Tan Justin. Instead, she turned around and immediately fled backwards. Naruto and Marcus exchanged a look as they both thought, what the hell, the rest of you are going to get horrendous scores if you don't attempt something, he said as he felt a sensation. Victory! Izzy cried out from behind Marcus, brandishing a bell, saying. Everyone was dumbfounded. How in the hell? Marcus asked, she asked, looking genuinely surprised and confused. I knew if I caught you completely off guard by doing something. He had to admit that the girl's actions were so bizarre that in some strange way they made sense. It was definitely strange enough that it made him stop and wonder what happened. Don't the rest of you think it'll be that easy? He said, taking a smoke pellet out of his pocket and throwing it on the ground. Crazy, I could sneak up on you and snatch a bell, she explained, tossing it up in her hand with a triumphant smile. You know, we just might have a spot for you on Shinobi too. Before he started looking for Naruto, a voice said, Naruto, I think you and I can help each other. Marcus was gone when the smoke dispersed, and in his place was a letter that said, 23 3 hours 52 minutes and 46 seconds to go. Naruto shook his head in shock, still reeling from the realization that the crazy girl had gotten a bell before him. I guess that's another person I have to watch out for, he thought. As they continued their trek, Naruto started studying the Hispanic Canadian. She had shoulder-length hair, several shades of brown, including russet chemise and faux, onyx eyes, and mocha skin. He was quite surprised at who made the statement 926, but it didn't take him long to figure out why a class, as he called her proposition, the team up for this task. It was clear that he knew the producer Mr. Shington the best and had the best chance of facing him head-on. Blouse with 3/4 length sleeves, gray sweater vest, and green capris with high heel wedges. The young woman was very attractive, he had to admit, so you haven't said anything yet. What's our plan? She asked him as Naruto kept following Mr. Shington without saying anything for a few more feet. He was tracking him because of his strong cologne, and he was also looking for any signs of disturbed ground or footprints. I'm going to go straight after him and try to get a couple. As Naruto laughed and jumped over the log, she said, we need to conserve our energy. Aside from Eva and possibly that jock Tyler, the rest of them won't cause Mr. Shington any trouble until he started adding weights. He told me he used to run track in high school. I'll be able to take him in a straight-on fight, but it might take me a bit of time if I do happen to knock some loose. That'll be your opportunity to get them. Said once, he was very active in his younger years, which is why he prefers a head-on approach to projects like this. Unless he is being gentle with them, none of them should get a bell that early, he said as they continued their trek along the path. The sound of birds filled the air as they would land on the branch and chat for a while before taking off, and Naruto looked at the sun. I don't want him to alert our position with a bunch of noise, I promise. Not much time had passed at all. What about the orange-haired girl? She asked him about the incident with Izzy. Naruto grinned and laughed a little, saying he wasn't crazy enough. Courtney raised an eyebrow, indicating she didn't understand the reference. They soon came to a suspended log wedge between over a drop into a river. Naruto simply hopped on and started to walk across it casually. This challenge will take some time. 9:44 23 hours 15 minutes 42 seconds remained. Marcus was strolling through the forest, oblivious to his surroundings, dancing to a jazz song on his iPod. He dipped his head and stretched as a rock flew overhead. He continued forward, but as each rock missed him, he paused to yawn and stretch, closing his eyes for some reason. The bushes rumbled, seemingly oblivious to the person who was hurrying him, dipping back slightly with a sudden jolt. Turning to the left, we see a boy named Pride censoring as he shouted as if he were a football announcer and a home team player scored a touchdown. But yeah, kid, are you sure this is the best idea? Hey jerk off, you were the one who challenged us to try to take the bells. I'm going to take one of those bells, Duncan said, raising his hands and getting ready for some fisticuffs. As it turns out, the incoming person was the green mohawk-bearing criminal look-alike Duncan. Joking, Marcuse shrugged casually as he began to make smooth robot motions with his shoulders. If you think you can take a care to try, but this ain't what you won't, Marcus said, challenging him as he made a bring it finger motion. Duncan charged forward and met with air. What the hell, come out, you coward, Marcus said, dropping down from above and landing a solid kick to the back of Duncan's head, sending him crashing to the ground. 1 down, 24 to go, the producer said as he continued along his path, leaving a dazed and hurt Duncan behind. 957 Yum, I'm sorry, Marcus asked incredulously as the pretty boy repeated again, don't you want to hand me a bell? The pretty boy said again, making an odd gesture that said, "I like you." According to Justin's profile, he was the only American in the group, a native of Hawaii, with soft black hair, smooth rogue-like features, a ripped body, and a clean-cut six-pack. He was wearing tight black pants and a sleeveless forest green muscle shirt that were more appropriate for the mall than for the outdoors. After looking at the boy's profile, Marcus wondered why he was picked. Now that he knew the juvie with the piercings and background, he realized that perhaps the bad boy had attracted the brain-dead fawn girls who thought that a bad boy was a good boyfriend material or that he was passionate or a hurting soul that they could heal. However, the attractive boy had no real skills that would help him survive out here, which only added another mark to Marcus's growing list of evidence of Chris's repressed homoerotic nature. Marcus said, "I'm just going to put an end to this." He said, "I'm feeling a little uncomfortable because of the looks the tanned male model was giving him. What the hell was going on? Could I possibly have found the one person immune to my charms?" Marcus then picked up a clump of dirt and threw it at Justin, who screamed and ducked out of the way. Yes, the boy needs to protect his looks. May was driving him away far too easily, and now to hide a Bell 1012 now. Interesting twist on the test, so what should I do? Marcus's path was blocked again by another brunette with light green eyes. He was a normal-looking boy wearing a lime green overshirt, black pants, and a green cameo shirt. Nothing about the kid seemed out of the ordinary, but perhaps he should have paid a little more attention to the profiles. "Get the bells," the cheesecake fanatic asked, as the tiny bells jingled with every movement. "I'm not much of a fighter, so how about we come up with a theme song I can play when you appear on camera and I give him a bell deal that sounds fair to his ego?" Normally, this wouldn't work, but Marcus chose to correct the child for his foolishness. The boy played a few notes on his guitar before the tree branch broke and fell on him. After making sure the boy wasn't seriously hurt, the man pulled out his phone and called in some of the interns to make sure the boy wouldn't be mauled by an animal. 1134 Heel, can someone please help me get out of here? The sun-kissed blonde surfer said, "Give me a second," as she walked over to the tree and looked for something to cut the rope. She found a roughed-edged rock and put it in her pocket. She then climbed up the tree and shimmed across the branch, starting to saw the thick rope with the rope. Harold, the brown-haired boy with the glasses, was hanging from the tree thanks to a rope trap. Based on his appearance and body, it was clear that he was quite nerdy. As they continued their trek 1212, one of the campers said, "Hey, I think I see a bell," as one of the golden bells gleamed from a tree branch high up. Jack Rock 1145 You know we've been walking around aimlessly for hours now, just when are we going to get those bells? Courtney was getting a little impatient because she felt like they were wasting time walking around, and the smell of animal waste wasn't helping the situation. Most of them lacked the necessary survival camping skills, so some of the campers decided to band together because only one of them would be eliminated and there was no reason to spend hours wandering around aimlessly when they didn't have to. Jeff was a laid-back and fun-loving cowboy with short blonde hair and piercing blue eyes who wore a pink shirt and shorts. He seemed pretty laid-back and carefree compared to the other campers, which is pretty high. He pointed out that if one were lucky enough to survive, the height from where the bell was would undoubtedly amount to a full body cast. Therefore, someone needs to get the bell, but who will get it? Lena, an African Canadian, asked the same question as the majority of the other campers. Her jeans and her mustard yellow shirt with Apple graphics weren't really practical for hiking through the woods. She wished she had changed into something else, as she kept scratching her arm. The muscular Jamaican DJ expressed his thoughts, saying that since he is wildlife mindful and has camping experience, the group had been following his instructions on how to track the host. "I'm an expert at this kind of thing. I got this," the red jumpsuit wearing Jock Tyler exclaimed proudly, rubbing his hands and walking around on the tree. He hopped up on it and tried to pull himself up but fell off. "I got this," he said, stretching his knees and legs and trying to climb up again only to fall off. He said, "I think that host guy must have put something on the tree to make it slippery." The others rolled their eyes. "Sure thing, buddy," he said, picking him up ally. He launched Tyler up above and over the bell until the screaming Jock was no longer audible. "How original the big guy who doesn't know his own strength is," Noah, an Indian, remarked sarcastically, but the others seemed indifferent to his contemptuous remark. They were attempting to decide who would go next. At 12:35, Marcus was sitting against a rock and appeared to be asleep. His snoring was audible throughout a small area, as if he was unaware of the two people watching him. Courtney suggested that Nar should halt her by grabbing his shoulder and shaking his head. "It's a trap," Naruto said, moving his right leg back and taking a deep breath before he shot forward more quickly than a typical human could understand. As he launched himself deeper into the forest, Marcus ducked and weaved out of each punch Naruto was launching at him, being careful to conserve his energy. Naruto was not only younger, but he was also still training and maintaining his skills. He snatched at the bells only for his hand to go through. "Damn it, a projection," and he started clawing at the air. Just as he thought a background, the entire small area was masked quite nicely to disguise the trick. His form, and Marcus only exercised a little to keep himself safe, he lacked the strength to outlast the blonde in a straight-up fight. The fight lasted for a long time until the blonde kicked him, and he was careful not to show it. Naruto then made a grab for the bells and grinned, "Thanks for the bells, Mr. Shington," and waved as he took off. It only took a moment for Marcus's eyes to enlarge as he raised the bells. "I must admit that I was a little skeptical, but you did pretty well." Courtney gave Naruto a rather patronizing compliment, but Naruto ignored it because he knew that he should get to know the girl better before forming an opinion about her. "Well, that's what I do. Most actors are okay with being pretty faces with stunt doubles, but that wasn't something that would sit well with me. In fact, that was the only reason I joined this competition, just to get away for a little while and have some fun, but it's not really winning for me. I reasoned that this is my best chance for a vacation, and you won't even try. Isn't that a waste of your abilities?" Courtney, who is the typical type, a 4.0 GPA and an extremely athletic overachiever, distantly avoided people who were careless or lazy because she couldn't understand why people would waste their potential and not give it their all because. "Early in this competition, anyway, you can go back to camp if you want. I'm going on ahead," Naruto said, making Courtney stop dead in her tracks. "Wait, where are you going?" she asked him. "I'm going to watch the others and see how they're acting. I got a leadership bell, so might as well try to learn a bit about the people who I will choose for my team." He paused, then turned to see how she would react. "Unless you want to come too, actually, that sounds like a good plan. All right, I'll come with you," she said as she approached him. She said, "You know where you're going, right?" and Naruto grunted in annoyance. "Yes, you can be a little less critical of people," he said, as they continued to walk into the forest. It was 19 hours, 33 minutes, and 15 seconds. Gwen walked through the forest exhausted, wiping the perspiration from her brow with her sleeve. She wished she had changed into some lighter colors before taking on this challenge because she couldn't believe she got herself into this mess. She was just a little above average in sports, but only because she was a bit of a tomboy in her youth. Her interests waned after puberty as her independent nature and how easily she came to odds with most people led her to develop a lone wolf persona. "UG, these are new shoes too. It's going to take forever to get the smell out. What's wrong, a class I thought you dealt with?" As Gwen weaved between some trees to spot two of her fellow contestants, he looked around and startled her by saying, "Hey," he waved, "we're forming an alliance, you know, since half of us will be grouped into a team. We can help you get a bell if you want. I'm used to playing volleyball, basketball, and stuff like that before, not trekking through the walls and having to avoid bear excrement," he said. The blonde shrugged his shoulders and said, "It's a waste of time. Everyone is going for that prize money eventually, all of us will be opponents in the end, so no one is going to trust us. Nevertheless, you ended up forming an alliance with me, so isn't that the opposite of what you're saying now? Don't worry, we already have some, so we're not trying to trick you," Naruto said, holding up a silver bell. "Thanks, I'm fine on my own." Despite the fact that it went against what she was saying, Naruto brought attention to the fact that Courtney had formed an alliance with him. "Well, as you pointed out, this competition just started, so there's no reason to make enemies right away. Let's just go on to the next person," Naruto said, pulling out a kunai and throwing it into a random tree, which caused the branch to vibrate and a few tree leaves to fall, revealing a bell. "You never know, we might become allies in the future, so at least," he said. Gwen couldn't help but be skeptical of Naruto's offer because what that Courtney girl said was true, and eventually it was going to come down to two people. A friend today would be an opponent tomorrow, and she couldn't afford to be distracted because her family really needed that money 17 hours straight. "Give it some thought," he said, leaving Gwen behind to retrieve the bell that was high up in the tree. "What is with people trying to punch me?" Marcus asked as he leaped over As he continued to run like a scared chicken, leading his attacker into a trap, Marcus thought to himself, "Good lord, those teenager muscles are bigger than mine." Small Ravine escaped another attack from the Eva girl. "Get back here, coward, fight me like a man," she roared as she hopped on a log and chased after the chaotic cheesecake fanatic. Marcus responded by doing a front flip, unintentionally causing the Cody kid in the shin to land on the ground and stop in a roll after a tree branch caught his pants. Ended up yanking off some of his bells. Oh well, screw it. He decided that the teen's attempt qualified for this small reward. "I got you, now get ready to taste the pain." It seems that the rather butch girl didn't notice the bells. "Today is not my day." 15 hours 32 minutes 24 seconds. Bridget and Trent went back to the campsite and saw no one else, leaving them to wonder if they were the first ones finished, excluding Izzy. The surfer girl asked, "You found a bell, Leah?" and he replied, "Yes." On the other log, Trent asked with a raised eyebrow, "Where did you find yours?" and she said, "A bear-infested cave. I don't want to talk about it," with a thoughtful expression on her face and her head dipped slightly. "You're a river, just an alligator-infested one," Trent said, "and I know that sounds wrong in like 6 different ways, but that's the closet. I can come up with an identity what I just saw." She pointed to his partially torn pants leg, saying, "Yeah, you're telling me." She lifted up her blue hoodie to show that the white shirt underneath was partially torn. "I don't know about you, but I'm going to file a complaint because this is way too risky for the average person to do." Oh, and by the afternoon, the campers were exhausted, hungry, and just acting out on different levels of. As there were only a few hours left, everyone who had won the Bell Test Challenge so far had gathered in the mess hall, exhausted, sore, and plain hungry. However, More than half of them had just wandered around aimlessly during the day until some of them, with the exception of Izzy, Naruto, Courtney, Trent, Bridget, Cody, Harold, Heather, Noah, Lena, DJ, Jeff, Harold, Duncan and Eva, managed to stumble upon a bell by sheer luck. It couldn't get any worse than this, right? Courtney asked as she walked around the bowl of food that the chef had fixed with her fork. The Aster wished she had remembered to pack food. As she looked up, she saw Naruto giving her a strange look that she wasn't used to. Oh, if she had only known that Naruto was about to decide whether or not to dope slap her, you never would have jinxed the situation between Mr. Shington and Chris. Hello, my name is Trent, and I was hoping to talk to you two about this idea Bridget and I came up with. It involves Mr. Shington, Naruto said, glancing out into the forest to the general direction when the fat boy Owen and the extremely thin Ezekiel entered. That means there were still 6 more contestants they would have to wait on until it was all over. Mind if I take a seat, he said, grumbling as he approached. As he turned to face the group at a table where the newcomers sat, he said, I'll hear your idea about before I give a definite yes or no. Businessmen like him are shrewd, and if they don't get you back, they know people who can, so be sure this is the right choice. Apparently, one of them was mentioning that the only reason he was here was because his parents wanted him to interact with other kids his age, and they probably shouldn't have chosen to homeschool him to the extent that sending him to an island for. We should be helping the girls even though they aren't as strong as guys, but as soon as Ezekiel said those words, the atmosphere became tense. Eva tightened her fists and narrowed her eyes, demanding, well, guys are better at physical challenges than girls are. Ezekiel repeated the statement without realizing the danger he was putting himself in, and the next thing anyone knew, the boy was thrown into a wall, and Naruto shook his head and palmed his face. Ezekiel asked, holding a Kleenex to his bloody nose, if I have to listen to that homeschooled prairie boy's sexist remarks one more time, I think I may kill him. Eva growled as he punched her fist into her other palm. I may not agree with Eva's tactics in handling Ezekiel, but I think he's asking for it. Bridget readily agreed, and the normally docile girl was also furious. I can already see we're all going. I'm just waking up, I have a rumble in my belly, I'm R. Kelly. Marcus sung as he moonwalked over. Naruto said sarcastically, to have a grand old time, and started scratching his ear. Hey, I'm allowed to say foo number 5 on camera, right? Naruto asked as he looked off screen. Confession came over one by one. The rest of the campers had all trudged in cover in dirt and, gods know what, with bruises, heavy breathing, and pretty much the look of someone who had a shitty day. What the hell, sir, he said, recalling who he was speaking to, I thought you would have been here 15 minutes ago seeing as it was the time you said I got lost. He pulled out the map, which was upside down, and Chris gripped it tightly, unable to believe the man's actions. Marcus looked down at the map and then looked up with a raised eyebrow, saying, learn to relax and enjoy life for what it is, Christopher. Mr. Uzumaki paused, realizing that he hadn't committed this camper's memory to memory. What's your name, Miss Heather? She asked. Yes, Heather, the dark-skinned man nodded. The entire exchange was suspicious as how the hell did she get a silver bell, he demanded, surprised that the girl would have been able to get it. She looked fit and possibly athletic, but her attitude. He trailed off as he began to reflect on what had happened earlier that day. Marcus was walking through the forest when he ran into the contestant, so you still have a silver bell, right? Heather began assessing the man as she prepared to try to sweet-talk him before delving into a sinister scheme. Her manner of carrying herself suggested that she was someone who only worked out to maintain their figure rather than someone who worked out to gain speed, strength, or pursue a career in sports. Why, yes, I do miss him. He shrugged as he tossed her the bell and left. It was a cute attempt, and he decided to reward her for her trouble because, from what he saw, this girl had the makings of your typical reality. I couldn't help but wonder what trick this one was going to pull off, and you don't mind if I have one right? She asked, pouting her lips and slightly sticking out her chest to show some cleavage. Heather was used to using her appearance to get what she wanted, and she couldn't boss the person. Marcus concluded as he saw a mix of shocked, perplexed, and angry looks from the campers. I am a reasonable man. If any of you would have tried diplomacy instead of attacking me, I might have been as reasonable, he explained. Every show needed that villain character. It was what added the spice. But wait, what Heather did. She was dumbfounded and did not expect it to work that quickly or easily. Oh well, not like she was going to complain. I thought you lived for the misery of others, Christopher, at least that's what my associates from your previous show told me. Well, I can watch everything from the monitors in my trailer, but no, you're the main host of this show, and I'm paying you to be here, so I want my money's worth. Chris said quietly, Hey boss man, you can handle this right, I'm late for my thing, as Marcus rolled his eyes. Payments, so now we're down to the names. What's excited you? Marcus turned back to the campers who were nervous because one of them would be returning home soon. As Marcus nodded, he said, Celestial Foxes it is Queenie. Naruto's face fell, and he sighed, What do you always go with foxes? You even have a pet fox if I remember exactly. I always do, so some little variety would be nice. Yeah, well if you're going to be the team leader, then we need information about you to maintain consistency. As viewers of the movie are already aware that your character has a relationship with foxes, he then turned to the other team, saying, Your name will be the Howling Wolves. Those were much better names than the ones Chris chose, who wanted to cheer for BAS or Gophers. Now it's time to pick your teams, he said, telling the other campers to get up. Naruto and Heather were sitting on two logs across from each other, and Naruto already had a couple of the campers in mind. Wanted to work with Courtney, who he chose as his first obvious choice because she was intelligent, had counselor training, and was the person he already got along with fairly well. Courtney took her seat next to Naruto and nodded confidently. Lindsay was Heather's first choice. The blonde cheered and joined the Asian Canadian Gwen, which seemed to surprise the goth girl a little. She joined Nut's side as well, but she sat far away from him, and Justin the pretty boy flexed his muscles, making most of the girls swoon. Chris spoke up, but it was really an excuse to end this ceremony as soon as possible so he could get his massage. Beth, Cody, Sadie, Noah, Tyler, Owen and Trent, you joined the Howling Wolves. Everyone else the Celestial Foxes. Of course, there were a lot of protests at this, especially from the team captains who discovered some of the people they were forced to be with a team on. As he took his seat by Heather, I just realized something. If we have a cohesive team where everyone liked each other, that would be way too boring. Not all that favorable, only for Chris to remind them that he was one of the hosts and that he said, go unless he was vetoed by Mr. Shington. Marcus quickly reminded everyone over the midst of the argument, who do you all think should leave, so that the actual voting process could begin. Once they started their first real challenge, Ezekiel, the loud echo of the female contestants came through as one of the only times it would ever happen. All I did, BB, was to imply that the girls needed assistance because they aren't as strong as guys. Isn't that a reality of life? If Marcus hadn't intervened, Eva would have tackled and severely beaten the boy. Regretfully, kid, it appears that you were brought up with a somewhat misogynistic viewpoint. You don't appear to be a bad kid, but this show has just begun, and we can't risk our ratings right away with explicit choices. As Marcus led Zek to the dock until they were out of earshot, he explained, "To all those out there, I would just like to say that I'm going to win this competition. You might not be an official contestant, but how about you help me on a few projects? You'll learn some things, and who knows, maybe you might come around to a new way of thinking. Those rabid and man-hating feminists make feminists in general look bad by making these huge protests. And nobody is going to stand in my way. All I know is that if Marcus Sapp is as susceptible to manipulation as he was in the first challenge, this will be easy." Next, we cut to Naruto playing with a paddle ball, and something tells me that someone will require therapy. After that, we cut to Gwen's first day, and I'm already starting to feel uneasy about the whole thing. She admitted it, and I sighed, but I can't give up. I have my reasons for coming here, and I can't give up. Finally, Chris stated as, a large white half-circle casually floated near the base of the cliff, and another smaller white circle some distance away from it. The whole thing sounded dangerous, especially since there might have been rocks, and who knew what else was down there 3 times as dangerous as yesterday's. Most of the campers looked uncomfortably over the edge of the cliff they were on, and there was a huge drop in the distance from their sight to the water. This made some of them uneasy. Chris's tone was full of amusement, and he said, "You better have tested this out thoroughly." Marcus whispered to him, the last thing they needed was lawsuits. He couldn't believe Chris didn't have the foresight to have a medical team on standby for such a dangerous stunt piece of cake. The surfer girl Bridget calmly said, "I'm used to things like this," and for some reason, even now, she had her surfboard in hand. Given that surfing is a hobby and that surfers wouldn't be afraid of heights or water, Chris went on, "If you look down, you will see 2 target areas. The wider area represents the part of the lake that we have stocked with ravenous here." He stopped and chuckled, then continued, "People eating sharks they haven't been fed for the past 2 days. So unless you completely miss the marker or just fail at life, you should be okay considering the unique body shapes." Chris glanced at Owen. "Of some of you. You must be kidding, ravenous sharks. This must be illegal or something." "It's in your contract," Marcus said as he reached behind himself and pulled out the contract, which Naruto was certain was going to be a once-a-day thing. "You can leave now, but those who leave will be forfeiting their chance to win. Generously large, so just fall into the target area and you will be fine." "Excuse me," Lana asked him, her voice full of both fear and indecision. "We need to test the stunts first because that's what you signed up for, and it's what you signed up for. You guys don't pay us enough for this sit," he said, referring to a rather large intern with the goatee, red baseball cap turned backwards, red and tan jacket, and matching shorts. "I assure you, Miss Cheeseman, these stunts were tested out." He started to think back to earlier that day when the chef and several interns were standing on top of the 1,000-foot drop while wearing swimwear. At the end of the story, the contestants were fairly disturbed. For each team member who jumps and actually survives, there will be a crate of supplies waiting below. Inside each crate are supplies that you'll need for the second part of the challenge, building a hot tub that the team with the best one gets. A few moments later, the chef said, "In turn, you were floating face down in the water. Well, that seems safe enough." Marcus then kicked him over the edge to give him a taste of his own medicine. "Let's see, Celestial Foxes, you're up." First, Bridget wandered over to the edge of the cliff and was staring down towards the water. "Wow," she sounded less confident. This zero distance was about 2 to 3 times the largest cliff she had ever dove over. "So, who wants to go?" First, hesitant looks were shared among the groups. When there were no answers, Eva repeated the question. When the question of who would go next was repeated, Bridget reluctantly offered herself. Okay, I'll go. It's no big deal, just an insane cliff dive into a circle of angry sharks, she said, and without saying another word, she performed a perfect swan. I should go first, Naruto said as he took the first step forward, then took a few steps back, then charged forward and jumped over the side, falling into a cannonball and landing inside the safety zone. His head popped up from the water as he shivered and coughed a few times. Damn water. As he floated past on his back, Naruto congratulated the surfer girl, saying, "Oh, thanks." Bridget flashed her fellow blonde a kind smile, saying, "But since I do my own stunts, I have to do a lot of training in doing dangerous things like this elsewhere." Above the cliff, some of the campers were being pumped up as two successful jumps pumped up their confidence. Tyler was ecstatic she did it. Dive right into the center of the safe zone. Way to go, amazing dive, more graceful than I did. Yes, I am. He then ran back towards the group, turned around, and ran towards the cliff, shouting, "Kabanga." He jumped into the water feet first. Naruto's warning shout was too late, though, because the boy had landed too close to the buoy and hit his foot on it. Despite this, he remained conscious and floated above the water. The next sound we heard was a low clang, and I ran to the edge. When I looked down, I saw that he had jumped directly on a buoy. Then Jeff jumped with a woohoo, followed by Izzy with a crazy laugh as she did something like a belly flop, and Duncan jumped on his way down, clutching his hands over his stomach without making a sound. As he moved away from the edge, scared of heights, DJ said, "No way, man, I'm not jumping." Chris asked with his typical smug grin, "Yeah, ever since I was a kid," the Jamaican admitted. "That's okay, big." Chris told him, "Dude, that also makes you a chicken, so you'll have to wear this for the rest of the day." He put a chicken hat on top of DJ, a man for real, and he complained, "That means the chicken down is that way." Chris pointed to the escalator behind him, and the embarrassed DJ, head down, went over to remove it. Finally, it was Courtney's turn. "Excuse me, Chris. I do have this condition that I haven't mentioned, and the condition is that Chris Skly asked a condition where I'm not capable of. It's a calculated risk. I know enough about the team to know that none of them will jump, especially one who's afraid of water. I'd rather be humiliated than take an insane cliff dive into a huge area filled with sharks," she said, adding that most reasonable people do well. "You can skip the challenge, but if you back out, you'll be the second one who chickened out and contribute to the loss of your team score, and then they'll hate you. Choice, which means you'll have to wear this chicken hat for the rest of the day." He put the chicken on her head, much to her annoyance. "You must be kidding," she asked, her voice lacking any hint of amusement. Chris smiled at her while he did it, acting as though she was laughing. "The chicken path is that way," he growled, and Courtney had no choice but to accompany DJ down the escalator. The boat where all the jumpers boarded soon took off to make room for the other team, and one by one, they all made their plunges with their little style and flair. Justin missed his jump, which somehow made the sharks fall in love with him and carry him to the shore. Katie and STI jumped together, and even the team leader Heather was thrown over the side by tough girl Eva. Beth was the only member of the opposing team who didn't jump, but since Justin landed outside the safety zone, it just worked out a way to balance things out. After everyone boarded the boat, they covered themselves with the blankets that were on it, and Chris emerged from the water. Cliff shouting into the microphone that the ravenous wolves had won, and now we will get to the elimination. Marcus started. "After everyone returned to land, we will have a major challenge once a week, which will either end that day or take place over a few days. Following each major challenge, teammates will vote off the team they believe failed them, and as of right now, you are all performing a 3-point major challenge for those of you who didn't jump earned. I'll let Chris tell you guys about the second part of your challenge when he stepped back and Chris took center stage once more. 1 strike can be earned by refusing to complete the challenge, not helping your teammates, or just plain screwing up. 3 strikes and you are flat out eliminated, something we cooked up just so some of you are kept around by your friends because they like you or something like that. He grinned as some of the crew brought forth 4 crates to the opposing team. The opposing team cheerfully left with their wagon supplies, singing 99 beer bottles on the wall, while the Celestial Foxes were left far behind. The majority of the over team was struggling, with Duncan kicking his box a few feet forward with a foot and Courtney pushing hers forward with her palm. The first part of today's game was too bad, Celestial Foxes, but better luck next time. While pushing his crate through the sand with relative ease, using his back, Naruto noticed that Bridget was having a particularly hard time. "I'm afraid I'm not built for strength, balance is sort of my thing," she said, watching in awe as the blonde knelt down, using his knees to lift up the crate and placed it on top of hers, flashing her a foxy smile. The other team began to fade from view, leaving behind an irate and irritated team in need of assistance. Suggested that they push their crates together because it would be easier, but they were unaware that Courtney was watching them. She asked herself, "Why should I care?" as her fingers dug into the crate and she ended up with a splinter. "We're just teammates and alliance mates who are helping each other, so he can flirt with the surfer chick all he wants as long as it doesn't ruin my chances of winning," she said. For some reason, Chicken Courtney had a rebuttal. "Hey, I'm the only one with CIT camping experience here, you need me." However, it sounded more like an appeal than a rebuttal. Eva and DJ exchanged a skeptical look, saying, "We don't have time for arguing, guys, come on now." Naruto booed in to avoid any arguments. "We all agreed to be here, so we might as well make the most of it." "I'm not sure about you, but..." After Naruto finished this statement, Courtney gave him a grateful look and said, "Look, why don't we do this? Each of us pairs in threes and carry a box. We only have 5 boxes, so that leaves half of us to go ahead and get started on at the hot tube while the others go and retrieve the rest of the material." The group had a brief discussion before deciding that Naruto's suggestion was a pretty good idea. "Good one," so they split up into 3 groups, with Nero, Bridget Courtney, and DJ Izzy Lana in the last group. Then, Harold said, "Hey, what's up, guys?" and set his and the others' boxes on the ground. Trent asked, "Hey, what's up?" Despite being on the opposing team, he waved and smiled at them. "I'm heading back for the box," Lana asked. The other team was on their way to fix the hot tube, and the other team was already starting. Since most of them weren't known for their construction skills, they thought they were done. "I'm going back for the remaining boxes, but if the rest of you are worried about getting left behind because there aren't enough workers, you can stay here and try to figure out how we're supposed to start this whole thing without waiting for objections or feedback." Naruto continued to make his way back to the beach. "Alright, guys, we need a project manager because I've actually been a CIT." The group proceeded to open their crates and go over the material at hand. None of them had nails, so they had to wait while they built the hot tube filter and steps. Meanwhile, Naruto was idly pushing the 2 stacked boxes along the sandy beach floor, leaving. "Before I elect myself, any objections should be raised because their apparent leader had gone up and left Courtney, who thought she was the best person to take his place. So where do we start, chicken girl?" Duncan taunted the girl who ignored him. "Do you need some help, he heard behind enormous drag marks. He looked up and was shocked to see Gwen standing a few feet away. "What are you doing here?" he asked, genuinely surprised by her presence given their previous encounter. "I'm not that well versed in construction, and I thought it was a bit unfair that you were the only one that went back for the boxes considering your idea was the reason we got back to camp as fast as we did if Gwen were to be honest with herself. It would be nice to have someone who would have her back here because, from what she had seen so far, not many of her team members were going to be helpful in challenges that were based on physical labor or camping because their island was a setting and all those with practical knowledge about the forest and camping were going to have that. She thought the blonde could help her because he really seemed to be doing pretty well. He was also somewhat of a movie star, so he wasn't broke. As they continued pushing the box towards the campsite, Naruto shrugged and said, "Need edge." Gwen joined him. Chris stood between the two hot tubs and walked over to the ravenous wolf's hot tub. He looked at it for a minute before grinning and saying, "This is an awesome hot tub." The ravenous wolves were obviously quite thrilled. Meanwhile, Marcus was looking at the fox's hot tub tape. "Really fail," he said as he kicked the poorly built hot tub as it fell to pieces. Chris said, "I think we have a winner here, the ravenous wolves," as they turned to the camera. The team cheered, and Chris said, "Wolves, that's another round in favor. Enjoy your hot tub tonight, because the third part of your challenge starts tomorrow, and you'll definitely need a soak afterward. Come down to the mess hall at 7 tonight to get information on the last challenge. If you have any other ideas," brilliant leader Duncan Snidely said, while everyone on the Foxes felt let down by the lost. Was the first to point out that they were losing. "Come on, man, it was a good idea. After all, without nails, we were doomed to fail." DJ argued in Nut's defense. The peaceful Jamaican detested arguments and fighting, especially when the people fighting were on his team. "No one asked you, chicken boy." Duncan snapped, bringing up the fact that DJ contributed to the team's losing streak. Jeff tried to defuse the situation by putting a hand on Duncan's shoulder only. Naruto was not in the mood for a child, ___, and to be honest, after the troubles he had witnessed and the turmoil some of his friends had endured over the years, his sympathy for the problems of a normal person was rather low. "If you feel that way, pretty boy, we won't keep you here because if you're just going to attack members of this team, then we'll vote you off and save ourselves the headache." Naruto shook his head and sighed. As soon as the Tan Cit spoke up, he was forced to think. "Forget the jerk if he can't be a team player, then we don't need him," she said, smoothing out her white shirt and gray sweater vest. Her olive-colored pants were slightly stained from moving the crates, and her chestnut brown hair was slightly parted. With the mood killer gone, she suggested that we all sit back and get to know one another. Jeff was laid back and friendly, so it might be a good idea. Added, "I guess I can go first." As he started to gather the hot tub's wreckage, he stopped and considered what he should reveal. "As you are all aware, my name is Naruto, and I enjoy cooking, traveling, helping people, and practicing martial arts. I am also a movie star who has been acting for a few years. If anyone wants to go next, I'll go, of course," Courtney Bolster, cutting off the others before they could volunteer. "I'm Courtney, of course, you all know that, and I excel in violin leadership, singing, and playing the guitar." The CIT was about to say something when Naruto interrupted, saying, "Let's keep things short for right now. We have plenty of time in between the challenges to bond. Then, after the introductions, we can focus on figuring out what our future challenges are." Ballet started listing off several of her hobbies, which seemed to drag on for quite a while. I also have a 4.3. Yeah, wrap it up. We don't have all day to hear y'all's life story. After a period of bonding, the foxes arrived at the main lodge, where the cheerful gophers appeared to be having a good time. It appeared that speakers of some kind were set up in the room, and everyone had eaten and sat at the table. Since the challenge was just getting started, there wasn't much to discuss, but Naruto finally started sharing his teammates' ideas about the next one, which was to determine who was in first place, then to see how far we were willing to go, and finally, the last one is going to test our functionality as a team? Bridget asked, looking down at her bowl of soup. As a die-hard animal lover, she wasn't willing to eat whatever the mystery meat stuff chef was serving. Survival just seems to fit in with what's been happening so far. We haven't gotten a challenge to test us as a team, and it seems about time they'll do so, he added with a shrug. Suddenly, the cafeteria lights dimmed as Mr. Shington emerged from behind the kitchen's curtains. Entryway, as you are all aware, there is still one more part to this challenge. Mr. Shington turned to the camera, but my co-host is unable to join us today because he is acting like a lazy bastard. Jim Lee, a rough Asian trick, is probably going to give him a happy ending. Mr. Shington then turned back to the contestants. The last part of this will be a survival challenge paintball, and it won't be your typical game. I mean, one person will use a paintball gun to hunt you down. Unfortunately, you won't be able to get paint guns and balls until at least 2 contestants from opposing teams are left, that is, if you manage to surprise hit the music chef Mr. Shington ordered as the lights completely went out. A shot with blue means you have to freeze for 5 seconds, and a green ball means you're eliminated. The person can't hit you with the green unless you're hit with a blue one first. A high-pitched, ear-piercing scream was heard as a few contestants held on to the person closest to them. A very eerie, indistinct, and creepy music then blared from the speakers. This was followed by a very unsettling, steady tapping sound. Katie and Sight grabbed each other and started whimpering, and several other campers, including Trent and Beth Cody, appeared uneasy. Even Lisa and Duncan were fighting the urge to shiver as that pulse-pounding tap 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 was so damn uncomfortable. A black armored thing of some kind finally emerged from behind the curtains. Meet Hunter X tomorrow, he will be your demise. Behind the Min-Teal mask were enormous pupilless black eyes and a mouth that appeared to be poorly sewn shut. He asked, and the armored thing let out a horrifying shriek, which caused one camper, who will remain anonymous, to urinate. Upon seeing their faces, he couldn't help but laugh at the bastard. Now, the challenge winner receives the item their team, Mr. Shington said, I hope you all have pleasant dreams. Hunter X was waved away, and the sound of tap 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 filled the mess hall as Hunter X slowly left, possibly feeling the nightmares of several campers' confession can bring it because Izzy is ready to unleash the tiger. What's there to be scared of? Said the Orangette, unleashing a feral growl. What's there to be scared of? Bridget asked with a nervous laugh. Naruto said with a casual shrug, why am I not scared? You're all wondering, try waking up to that music and seeing something akin to Hunter X in your room and then you'll see where I'm coming from, but I can understand. Just some guy in a suit, he said, because if they're trying to scare us, they'll have to do a better job. Then a hand was placed on Bridget's shoulder, causing her to shriek and shoot the hell out of there, leaving only a somewhat confused Cody behind. Ultimately, repeated abuse can teach someone the concept of bladder control. Hunter X entered the confession cam and then pointed its paintball pistol at the camera, clearly signaling that it was prepared for the challenge the following day.